While doing research for my previous video on Oxford Furnace, I came across some claims that one of the furnace's founders, William Shippen Sr., was actually a grave robber who would dig up corpses to dissect as part of his medical research, and I wanted to do a video investigating these claims further. So for those of you who didn't see my previous video, the Shippen family were important figures in colonial Philadelphia, and William Sr. was one of Pennsylvania's representatives to the Continental Congress, serving in 1779 and 1780. William is also an important academician. He was a vice president of the American Philosophical Society, one of the founders of Princeton University, and a founder of the Public Academy of Philadelphia, which would later become the University of Pennsylvania, which is where he taught anatomy and surgery. On Wikipedia, there is actually a claim that William was known to take corpses from graves at a graveyard called Washington Square, which was located in Philadelphia, and that he would use these corpses as subjects for dissection during his anatomy lectures. And the claim continues by saying that people would actually stand guard and run him off and his assistant. As a side note, the statement here is actually grammatically ambiguous because they just got done mentioning that William Henry Harrison was one of William Shippen's students, and it is grammatically unclear which William they're talking about here. But since this is William Shippen's page, we'll assume that the William they're referring to here is William Shippen rather than William Henry Harrison. Now, if we follow the link given for this claim, we actually see that it takes us to this page here, which is a blog called the Bethel Burrying Ground Project, and it's written by someone named Terry Brookenshaw, who I've never heard of before. But this is a pretty extensive blog with many entries. However, if we search for Shippen, we actually find that there's only one reference to Dr. Shippen, and it relates to this image here, which shows the location of Dr. Shippen's office with respect to Washington Square, which is the graveyard that he was accused of stealing corpses from. And looking at this blog post, it's a blog post that was written on December 18th, 2019, and it describes events that supposedly took place in 1787. And this blog entry is based around quotations from two letters that were written, or from a letter that was written by Dr. Shippen to his son. And the rest of this entry is the blog writer's analysis of this letter. And immediately what I notice is these letters were actually written by Dr. William Shippen Jr. So Dr. William Shippen Sr. actually has a son who is also named William Shippen. And he was also a professor of anatomy at the University of Pennsylvania. So he also taught anatomy. And these excerpts, these quotations here actually discuss William Jr.'s attempts to obtain subjects for dissection and demonstration during his lectures. So it describes two events where William Jr. attempted to obtain corpses. And it actually doesn't even make any mention of William Sr. And the letters were actually written in 1787. So at the time, William Sr. would have been 75 years old. So it's unlikely he would have been dissecting anyone at this age, let alone running around graveyards digging up corpses. So what probably happened is whoever added that entry to Wikipedia was confusing William Jr. and his father, William Sr. So from that alone, we can pretty much dismiss the claims against William Sr. Also, the entry in Wikipedia implied that this stealing of corpses from this graveyard was a common occurrence. However, the source provided only refers to two different incidences, one of which he obtained a body from a burying house, so not even from the graveyard. So there's actually only even one case where he obtained a corpse from Potter's Field, which is another name for Washington Square. And if we look at both of these claims, the first incident is actually pretty difficult to figure out what's going on. They only say that they are at loss for a subject for dissection, and that some young men have twice been driven off by arms, once fired on and twice wounded. So who are the young men? And then later, with the assistance of 6 invalids with muskets, they were able to obtain a corpse, which they lodged in Dr. William Jr.'s anatomy theater, and that later some people broke into the anatomy theater and stole the corpse and reburied it. So this first entry doesn't even give any indication of how he obtained the corpse or who he obtained them from. So for all we know, in this incident, he could have obtained the cadaver in a completely lawful manner. Now, the second incident, Dr. Shippen obtained a corpse from a bettering house. So a bettering house was a hospital in Philadelphia that was dedicated to caring for the poor. And it's actually not uncommon even today for poor people who died, for the bodies of poor people who died to be used for medical experimentation. So if a poor person dies and their body goes unclaimed, they often use their body for medical research. And in this case, obtaining the body probably could have been completely lawful, and it's pretty clear that William Jr. did nothing wrong. It's also unsurprising that he was the victim of this type of violent attacks, because during the 18th century, there was a lot of stigma around dissecting corpses. People viewed it as a violation of the sanctity of the human body, and a lot of times medical researchers were attacked in this manner. Now, if we look at these quotations, we actually see that the source given for these excerpts from this letter is this page right here, which is actually takes us to this article right here, and it's referring to page 2.2 of this article. So page 2.2 of this article right here. So this is the search source being referred to by the Bethel Burrying Ground webpage, and the source just contains the same quotes, two more detailed versions of the same quotes, along with the same discussion of these quotes. So this is another version of this, another copy of the same quote, where they're having difficulty finding bodies for demonstrations, and they were able to obtain one with the help of these 6 invalids, and that some people broke into his medical theater and stole the corpse. And then after 10 days passed, they were able to obtain a second corpse from an almshouse. They acquired it as secretly and properly as possible, but people were able to find out about it and broke into his house and buried it in Potter's Field. So he now laments that he's going to have to go without a subject for dissection. And the source given for this So they basically then say that William Shippen Jr. So these accusations are actually referring to William Jr., not William Shippen. They don't even William Sr. They don't even mention William Sr. here. And William Jr. was a professor of anatomy and surgery at the College of Philadelphia, so what would become the University of Pennsylvania. And they give a reference to this Keeley and Purge book, so pages 1046 and through 1048, and that's actually this source right here. So this is a book giving biographies of famous American physicians, and it has entries for both William Jr. and William Sr. So this is page 1046. And we see first and foremost we have an entry on William Sr. So William Shippen, who was born in 1712 and died in 1801. So that's William Sr. And his entry, I'll leave a link to this entry as well in the comments, but this entry of William Sr. doesn't even mention obtaining corpses or stealing corpses from graveyards. Now, this is followed by an entry on his son, so William Jr., and this entry does discuss how he obtained his subjects for dissection. So the public was greatly opposed to dissection at the time, and Shippen met with violent opposition on the part of the populace, who stoned him and smashed on several occasions the windows of the house in which the dissections were performed. To allay this prejudice, he announced in letters to the newspaper that the bodies he used were those of persons who committed suicide or were legally executed, except now and then ones from the potter's field, so the graveyard. And so based on this, most of the bodies she was dissecting were actually bodies that were turned over from the court of people who had been ruled to have either been executed or people who had committed suicide. And only a small portion of them were obtained from this potter field, and it doesn't actually say how he obtained them from this potter's field. So for all we know, based on this quotation, all of the corpses he obtained could have been obtained in some type of legal manner or obtained with consent. So based on this source here we can't actually infer any wrongdoing on the part of William Jr. Now, the one other thing I'd like to look at are the letters that these quotes are taken from. The quotes provided in this article and in the Bethel Burial Ground blog. However, neither the article or the blog provides a proper reference to these letters. They just say that the original Shippen letter is held in the Library of Congress and that they're based on a transcript that was written by a doctor, or that was provided by a Dr. Randall M. Miller of St. Joseph's University. And the problem is, if you go to the Library of Congress and you do a search for William Shippen Jr., there are tons upon tons of entries for this guy. So each of these entries actually consists of, in some cases, hundreds of images of scanned documents, so scanned letters, scanned journal entries, scanned, is some manuscripts are scanned. I think the guy's will's even scanned in here. So finding the original documents for this is basically finding a needle in the haystack. And without the original letters from which these quotes are taken from, we don't know the context of these quotes, and we don't even know that they're accurate. So based on this, I can say that the claims even against William Jr. are quite suspect.